Hi, I'm Lloyd Kinsworthy, retired police captain from the San Jose Police Department and now a sales account executive here at B5 Systems. I'd like to invite you to watch a webinar that we did with our partners at Aero Electronics. This webinar will talk about public safety as a service and help you to deploy technology in your city and remove the barriers from problems of the past, such as long budget cycles and technical know-how needed to use that technology. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy this.
And welcome to today's webcast, how an as-a-service approach to public safety can fast-track your smart city initiatives. My name is Morgan Wright. I'm a senior fellow here at the Center for Digital Government. I'm excited about this one because being a former state trooper, detective, cop, and done this for a lot of years, I'm excited to see the progress we're making in equipping our first responders and public safety officers out there. But thank you for joining us. We're going to have a great session over the next hour. Now, before we dive into any of this content, I just wanted to share a couple of housekeeping notes. We will email a recording of this presentation to everybody within 48 hours. Use this for your reference. Feel free to pass it along to your colleagues, especially the ones who could not make it onto the webinar today. They can review the recorded webinar at a later date and get the same information that you folks are going to get today. Now, we've designed this to be interactive. Down at the bottom, you're going to see a Q&A button. Anytime during this webcast, just hit the Q&A button, pop your question in there. We're going to get to as many of these at the end as we can. So remember, hit those Q&A buttons and get them to us. And if you're interested in downloading a copy of the slides, you can do so by clicking on Webinar Resources widget at the bottom of the console. Also today, if you're on the interweb, just connect with your friends and peers over LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook. Just use hashtag GovTechLive. Share some of your thoughts, key takeaways, a couple quotes, because I guarantee you folks, this will be a lot of knowledge bombs coming at you today. Now, at the close of the webcast, there is a brief survey about the presentation. We'd like to hear what you think. We have made changes, and this is one of the changes you're going to see today, a different format based upon the feedback where people said we want a deeper discussion, more roundtable. So your actual survey results are helping drive what we deliver to you. Now, we recommend you disable your pop-up blockers. If you have any technical issues at all, we've got the crack staff from On24 here with Allie and Miles set to help you. Just pop your question in there, and they will help you do that. So, and any other time, just click on Help at the bottom of the webcast console, and you get the webcast help guide. Well, look, let's dive into the fun stuff now. So joining me today for this topic, and this is really good because this is a partnership between a couple of companies that are leading the charge in this area. The first one is Lloyd Kinsworthy. He's a retired police captain from the San Jose, California Police Department. Now, look, during his law enforcement career of over 27 years, Lloyd worked, a variety of assignments, and I'm going to get into those a little bit later. We also have Roland Ducote. Roland's the technical marketing director at Aero Electronics, and he's going to bring a decade of diverse experience, and I'm going to give you more of his background when we get to the actual introduction here. So here's what we're going to do today. We've just done the intro, kind of general housekeeping. I'm just going to give a brief overview of the changing landscape of public safety, and then we're going to get into the expert roundtable. We're going to discuss what is public safety as a service. What does that actually mean? What are some of the key challenges? We're going to talk about some case studies so you can actually see this stuff. It's not just slideware and vaporware. It's actually been built. It's in action. You're going to hear some case stories out of that, and we'll get into some final thoughts, and then we'll do a Q&A, and then we're going to close this out. So let me kind of kick this off real quick first, and let me tell you folks, things have changed so much when we start talking about public safety. When we start thinking about when I first started, and I'm going to date myself, 1982, very little technology in the cars. We might have had a radar. You might have had an old vacuum tube radio, things like that. We've come so far with the things that we're connecting, the things that we have access to. Back then, only the government could afford computers. Now we've got them everywhere. They're in the palm of our hands. So we're seeing cities being connected. We're seeing street lights now just not being dumb street lights anymore. They now double as video surveillance cameras and as sensors. We've got gunshot detectors. We've got license plate readers. We've got all of the things to help us police more effectively because guess what, folks? We can't hire our way out of a lot of the challenges we have. We just don't have as many officers out there as we need, firefighters as we need, paramedics as we need. So how do we do that? We've got to deliberately apply technology into this, and that's what you're going to see here today. So let me kind of kick this off. Let me dive into a little bit more about Lloyd's background. Like I said, 27 years in San Jose PD. He worked a variety of assignments in the Bureau of Field Operations, Special Operations and Investigations before retiring and joining V5 Systems. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree from Colorado State University and Global Campus in Applied Social Sciences. And he continues, just like most people do, you cut him, he still bleeds blue. He continues to assist law enforcement and other security-focused industries with his work at V5 System, which is a partner of our next folks, Roland Ducote. He's the Global Technical Marketing Director. He's got a decade of experience in solution and technical marketing. He began with Arrow back in 2000 and has served in a variety of sales, marketing, and operational roles. He's based in Denver, and he's responsible for onboarding a wide range of all the Internet of Things, IoT solutions, supporting applications in smart cities, retail, and industrial markets. So to Arrow Electronic Solution Groups, he represents Arrow's comprehensive portfolio of technology and services to include sensor, wireless connectivity, gateways, and cloud platforms. So he's got a BA from Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota, which I will be up in that area this next weekend, along with an MBA and MS from marketing from the University of Colorado at Denver. So, hey, folks, welcome to this. So I'm sorry, that was Roland there. So that's his nice picture too. And then let's kind of kick this off, right? So what is public safety as a service? We see a variety of things. We see campuses there. We see retail lots. We see offenders being picked up. We see students on college campuses, officers out there. So I'm going to kick this off, and I'm going to let me start off with you first here, Lloyd. Let's talk a little bit about, even though here's the definition, you've been in this business for a long time, and you've seen a lot of things change. To you, what does public safety as a service mean now?
So it's just a new way of getting that technology that cities need to work as smart cities. So the old way of doing things was when there was a problem, we'd recognize that problem, we'd decide what we needed to fix it, and then we would have to go through the long fiscal process to get the money so that we could purchase those products. After we purchased them, we would have to train our personnel how to upkeep them and go through all these things. So it was a long process, and we couldn't get the tools we needed rapidly. But with public safety as a service, it can be implemented, this technology, on demand and very quickly. So we're giving you those tools you need in a way that gets them out to you when you need them, and you don't have to wait through the process. And the whole trick lies within, you have an autonomous system. So when you go out as a service, V5 Systems and Arrow, they take care of everything for you. You don't have to train your staff, and you can depend on us to take care of that. And then on top of that, you don't have to go through the long budget cycles because we have flexible options for rental and subscription so that we can get you those tools when you need them. Like you talked about earlier, police work now, you need to work smarter rather than harder, and this helps you do that.
Yeah, and Roland, Lloyd hit upon a couple key things, which I know I've been the victim of it and the perpetrator of it, long acquisition cycles. You have a problem, but it takes you 18 months to get it in there. And now we've got the advent of, artificial intelligence, machine learning, autonomous systems, the way that we acquire this stuff has changed. So what's your perspective? Because you got a unique perspective too from the industry side. So how's your view of this like over the past 3 years, how things have changed?
Yeah, that's a great question. First, let me say thank you for having me on the webinar today, and it's a pleasure to be here with yourself and Lloyd. From our perspective, we see the rapid technology change. And so from a deployment perspective, if you're looking at long budget cycles, things that might take 6 to 12 to 18 months, you may already be behind. And so from our perspective, what we look at is technology that is available today that can be sustained over time. I think you brought up some great examples associated with artificial intelligence and machine learning, where that is definitely on the cutting edge of where technology is. And with that, you're going to see rapid technology change over the next 3 to 5 years just in that space. So I think technology change is one piece of it. The other is associated with resources. So the resources that actually understand that technology change can implement it to get the highest amount of value for first responders is another large challenge. So looking at, as a service solutions help solve for a lot of that.
And you guys bring up a couple of really good things, and that's we're going to move into the key challenges here because I think this leads into some of it. And we did talk about, Lloyd, you hit upon it too. A lot of times when you had to deploy things, you had to have all the know-how. You had to know everything, how to do it. We're too far advanced for that anymore. I mean, it's very tough to say every agency should have a data scientist and somebody who understands artificial intelligence. So that kind of leads into some of our key challenges. So I want to cover 4 key challenges here, and let's have a discussion around this too. So one of them I think leads right into it is the lack of technical know-how. It doesn't mean that folks are dumb. That's obviously not what we're saying, but it says we've become so far technical, so far advanced, it's very difficult for every agency to hold the expertise necessary to deploy the technology. I think you guys keyed in on too, lack of flexible budgets. How do we reprogram the money we're spending? Citizen privacy concerns, folks, I will tell you, in addition to cybersecurity, privacy is the #1 issue that I see out there when I talk to state governments, state CIOs, CISOs out there. And then here's the thing, though, too, being from rural area like Kansas, where I was a state trooper, we had many areas where we didn't have access to power and communications infrastructure. You could not deploy things even if you wanted to because there was no way to run power or connectivity out into the middle of a field, let's say. So those are the 4 key areas I want to key in on. So let's get to this first one. Let's talk about the lack of technical know-how. So I'm going to reverse this. Roland, let's start off with you. So when we're tasked with a multitude of things like it says right here, steep learning curves, let's talk about how as a service changes this whole complexity and makes it something that's actually achievable.
Certainly, and it goes back to how I started to say that the pace of technology change is not only rapid, but it continues to accelerate. And we do see that as a common challenge. There's some other things that are associated with the implications around public safety as a service, looking to have the best possible technology available for first responders and ultimately the customers in this case, which would be the citizens. But that increasing sophisticated technology, to your point, it requires a different skill set and a changing skill set over time. What we've seen from a global perspective here in the United States and other countries like the UK, that elements of the IT infrastructure is moving to third parties. In fact, there was an article earlier this week from Information Age that said about 32% of IT infrastructure in the UK has moved to some type of third party. And really, the consideration of moving those elements to third parties, so those IT infrastructure elements to third parties, is really a key consideration because from a vendor or contract selection perspective, it's incredibly important. I think we'll dig into that a little bit more, but the benefits that you get out of that are really driving a higher level of spend that would be available, as well as up-to-date trained service providers and a high level of flexibility.
And so, Lloyd, let me follow up with you on that because this actually leads into something based upon your experience. And as we all find out when we get on these webinars, Small World, his former chief, we're all friends together. And I remember talking to the former chief, Chris Moore, about some of the complexities and some of the problems with dealing with IT when they were wanting to deploy wireless or computer-aided dispatch, in-car connectivity. So based on this right now, the lack of technical know-how, tell us about some of the problems, the challenges you've had when you try to deploy this advanced IT in an agency and you realize, guys, we may not have all the skills we need to do this effectively.
Yeah, and we did run into that quite often where because the technology is advancing so quickly, what you try to do, and in most public service settings, is you'll pick a couple staff members, you'll try to train them up on this new technology that maybe they've never even been introduced to before. So as you're putting it out, you're depending on people who didn't create the technology or hadn't worked with it before as being your experts on this, instead of going with this service model where you have the people that have created it, they know about it, they can keep it up to date. So we would run into that quite often, especially when you're talking about wireless. I know it would happen with the MDTs when you hit dead spots. How are you going to solve those things? And so the old way of doing it, it just doesn't keep up with the technology as quickly as it's changing. So that's where this service model, you're always going to get up-to-date notifications push out to you, and there's always going to be a team of individuals working on that, which relieves your staff to go on and do some of the other things they might be doing in the IT world, whether that's desktops, computer, making sure your VoIP phones are up to date.
Yeah, I remember being the victim of becoming the department's computer expert because I was the only guy that knew how to turn on a computer. So you kind of, by default, you end up becoming that expert. Hey, before we move off of this real quick, Roland, too, I know because, like I said, your perspective, you come from the industry side. There's an advantage, and I know from working both sides, both the industry side and the public safety side, that there's an advantage to working with industry because you have folks that focuses on this all day long. In other words, the learning is there, the ability for reach back is there. So talk a little bit about the experience that you get when you can also deal with folks who do this consistently, 10 hours, 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, in every day of the year.
So I would add on to that to say that when we look at IoT solutions, as you mentioned at the top of the discussion, we're looking at solutions that are available to general industrial type customers or more to retail customers. So a lot of that technology can be cross-applied. But I was thinking about, as Lloyd was talking about, some of the examples that we've seen from rapid technology change over time and things that we can do from an industry-focused perspective. And AI and ML is absolutely in that sweet spot where there's organizations that have the technical knowledge around either model development. So if you're looking for specific models to detect specific elements within a video feed, as well as organizations that build out those inferences. So that's two key parts of what artificial intelligence is, and having that as part of an ecosystem is really important to us from a general industry focus, because we do believe that there's no one organization that can really do it all. It really does require an ecosystem to deploy these types of technologies, not only from what we've talked about to mitigate rapid change, and making sure that you've got the right technical know-how to be successful, but also making sure that the applications are tailor-made for what what problem you're looking to solve.
Yeah, and speaking of that, so I'm going to lead off with you on this one, Lloyd, too, because we know that a lot of times there's stuff out there that we could, public safety, whether it's police, fire, EMS, emergency operations, we'd love to have it. There's either no grant dollars for it or there's no money for it. And so the challenge has always been, how do we make budgets flexible? So we look at capital expenditures, CapEx, versus operational expenditures, OpEx. So, is it difficult, or are they finding it difficult to reallocate money to these urgent, these new projects?
Yeah, you would find a lot of times, and everybody on this call does it a little bit differently, but we're all in the same boat when it comes to our budgets. We usually, the fiscal year is coming up, so we put in our requests, the things we think we're going to need for the next year, and then we start building these budgets out for the year. Then the money is given out, and so that's your money. If something comes up in the meantime and you haven't allocated for that, it is very difficult to flex your budget and to try to find that those limited discretionary funds that aren't already allocated to something. So you have a problem, you know what the solution is, but you can't find the money to get it. Well, with the public safety as a service, it makes it a little bit better because you're not having to make that capital investment. You can do that OpEx model with these flexible spending plans so that you're able to get that technology that you need when you need it. The long budget cycle, especially like you talked about when you go with bond money, oftentimes it needs voter approval, it needs council approval. So by the time you get this technology you've identified, it might already be out of date, or there might be another technology that's already taken over and is a better choice for that problem you want to solve.
By the way, Lloyd, you have fans. Rebecca Souza from the city of San Jose says, hey, say hi to Captain Kingsworthy. They miss you in crime prevention. Apparently there's a slot waiting for you to come back.
Well, tell everybody I say hello. I miss them too.
Hey, but Lloyd, Roland, so let's go into that too, because like, again, I say coming from the industry side too, private sectors have always had a different way of applying money, and applying spending because they don't have the same rules and regulations states do. But when you look at creating these business models, kind of walk through about some of the process you look at to say, how can you get the most, I hate to overuse the phrase, but the most bang for the buck when you're thinking about these different models? Is it CapEx? Is it OpEx? Is it grant money? Et cetera. Yeah. So kind of walk through about these when you put these solutions together.
Sure. I think when we look at the different solutions, it really starts with the application. So thinking about, is it a temporary solution, and temporary obviously can be relative, or is it a longer term solution, something that, you're looking to have maybe a device or some type of asset that's going to be in place over a long period of time. There's other factors in there as well associated with managed services that are oftentimes part of this ecosystem that I keep referring to. But if, there's things that are critical for development to make sure that you get to your return on investment, of either decreasing cost or increasing quality of life. Think about like asset tracking or tracking vehicles around a particular municipality. You've got the technology side, but you've also got things like workforce enablement, as well as the ability to visualize data. And so I think those are some key considerations for us, one from a time horizon standpoint, and then also from a complexity standpoint. So like I said, with asset tracking, you've got maybe ODB2 devices that are, or OBD2 devices that are attached to a car, but you need some level of visualization and you need some type of maybe a mobile application for visibility. When you look at those different elements, each one of those is a key characteristic from a vendor or contract selection piece. From a technology and an industry perspective, we look to aggregate as much of that as possible to make it easy for our partners or for end users to consume the technology.
And this has been one of the challenges too, is like public safety has always been very good about telling you what they need, but finding the ways to be able to acquire it. And not just acquire it. One of the lessons learned after 9/11 was, because I did work in the defense intelligence community, was a lot of money was spent on building stuff, but we forgot about the maintenance piece. How do you build it but sustain it and maintain it? And that's one of the key things, correct me if I'm wrong, Roland, but I think that sustainment is also part of what's built into the model, isn't it, when we start talking about budgets?
It is absolutely. One other example I think Lloyd and the V5 team and Arrow have talked about is looking at things like an intersection and looking at intersection as a service. When you look at traffic analysis, things like cars are certainly a large factor, but when you're looking at a specific intersection, there may be other things that are happening there. So are there people, are there bikes, are there other assets that are moving through that intersection that might cause some type of traffic issue? So again, it's making sure that we're looking at a holistic picture from a time scale of deployment. So is it months, years, or potentially decades, where we're looking to deliver value, or are there maybe some other things from a holistic perspective that we would want to look at to get to the return on investment?
Yep. Well, let's go on to this next one. And Lloyd, again, we'll kick off with you because, as you know, coming from the law enforcement standpoint, privacy is a huge issue. Privacy of records or access to records, making sure that the appropriate privacy is pulled back when there's a public request for it. So let's talk about this. Like I say, I'm out there all the time, and I was just in Missouri. Number one topic is privacy. We hear about it from the social media stuff. So let's talk about privacy for a minute. So what does government need to do, especially when you're deploying these as-a-service solutions that include third parties, your trusted partners that are helping build this, to assure that everything's being done, it's being protected, and that we're actually very conscious of the privacy concerns that are out there?
Yeah, so citizens are, and we see it all the time, like you mentioned, they're demanding high levels of service, especially from government, especially when it comes to data, whether that be video or any other type of data that's collecting information. And so what governments need to make sure they do is that when they take technology, they deploy it correctly, and then once it's deployed, that they're protecting it appropriately. And so when you use the public safety as a service model and you have an autonomous system, which is key, so your whether it's video or what you're using the data for, data transmission, it's siloed into a separate system. So it might not be sitting on your system. So it allows you to oftentimes, when information's stolen, it's stolen on physical devices, whether that be a laptop, whether that be physical servers. So when you're doing this autonomous system, you're having that partner, that third party that you're working with who does this all the time, help you to protect that data. And that's one of the big things when you're looking for new technology, that the partner you're working with understands how important privacy is and how they protect it.
Yeah, because I tell you, like I say, it's the topic that's always tied for first. Hey, we're going to move on just real quick, but Roland, I want you to take this next one, though. This is kind of more solution focused too as well. So it's one of the biggest challenges, and I'll have Lloyd weigh in on it, but it's when we start looking at the inadequacy, because not everything's connected, not every crime problem, not every public safety problem is within 5 feet of a power outlet and fiber access, and connectivity. So what are some of the challenges around that as you start looking at these issues from a solution standpoint?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when we look at access to power, that's a huge and very important aspect of our partnership with V5, because there's, I think, a lot of different assets that do certainly require power, including different types of sensors, and you would need some type of access to power. So that's absolutely critical when you're going out and looking to build some type of infrastructure to support power. There's options to that, so things like trenching and others, but those are generally time-consuming, capital intensive, and there's other operational expense items that you can take a look at. I think the other thing is the frequency necessary associated with that. So when you're looking at access to power, is it something that is going to be necessarily on an ongoing basis, or can it be moved around? When we look at different types of solutions for access, it's a really important aspect when we look at both in the industrial and the retail space, and certainly would be important to cities with a higher level of complexity, because oftentimes when we look at industrial and retail, they're inside some type of building, there is some type of access to power, but in terms of municipalities, sometimes a power or wall work can be miles away.
Oh, I know. And Lloyd, we were joking earlier that there was no crime in San Jose, but we know that's not the case, right? So what were some of your challenges, too, around where you needed to deploy technical assets? You needed to have video surveillance, or let's say, whatever you had at the time that required power, that required infrastructure. I mean, that ended up being a challenge, right? Because you almost spent as much time running the operation as you did designing the solution so you could run the operation.
Yeah, that's true. It left you with a lot of questions, and oftentimes what happened was you had to put your solution where there was power and where you could get communications, and most of the time we all know that that's not where you need it. And so a lot of times you were just kind of stuck with what you had. We all know that trenching for power and connectivity is very expensive and very time-consuming, and we know that our problems move. And so with traditional systems, we found that if we did spend the money, trench, and put up a traditional system that was hardwired, once it was realized it was there, your problem would move, and you was stuck with that technology at that location and nothing for it to watch. With solutions like the solutions we have here at V5, you have the power and you have the communications built in. So when your problem moves, you don't need the power and communication because you can just pick it up and move with it. So it makes life a lot easier.
Boy, that is definitely the case too. So hey, what we're going to do is that we've set up the key challenges now. Now what I'd like to do is get into this next part. Let's really get down and start talking about real things that have been solved, real things that have been done. So the way I'm going to kind of do it is, Lloyd, I kind of want you to help frame the actual problem. What was the problem that we're dealing with? What were the issues? And then Roland, I'd like you to come in and talk about how the solutions were done. So let's talk about this one. 2 armed felons in 2 weeks. So we had repeated shootings. And when you have those things, like you said, you just described the issue. You had to normally set up solutions where there was power and infrastructure and hope that the bad guys and girls would come by where you were set up for them. They didn't always cooperate. So let's talk about this case study. You give me the operational details, describe it, and then Roland, I'd like you to come in and talk about then from a solution standpoint, how did we think about this and how did you solve it? So Lloyd?
Sure. Yes. So sure. The problem was a police department here, smaller department in the Bay Area, was having a problem with some individuals were showing up to this business complex near a park, and they were shooting firearms in the parking lot. It happened multiple times over several weeks, obviously a danger to the public, the people in the business complex and near the park. So, your traditional tactics to try to address something like this are, you increase patrol checks, you try to do surveillance on the area, maybe use overtime cars. But we all know with our tight budgets and our limited staffing today, a lot of times you don't have the resources to address it this way. So this department knew about V5 systems and knew about our portable solutions. They didn't have a lot of flexible spending left in their budget. However, they were able to do a short-term rental and deploy these units around this area where they didn't have power, the video solution on a roof of a business where they didn't have access to power. And then we were able to put some of our other technology around the area to help catch them. And I know you wanted to talk to Roland about the solution, but I can help fill that in, or Roland can run with that.
Yeah. Well, you'd give us the operational details, and then let's have Roland fill into it then from an application, design and, an approach standpoint too.
Perfect. So what we did was, go ahead, Roland.
So from an application perspective, I think there's a couple key characteristics, and Lloyd, certainly jump in afterwards to see what I missed. But one of those is the connectivity piece. So getting an understanding as to how you're going to get data off of the system in of itself is a key challenge. And Lloyd mentioned access to power, which is also another key challenge. The other, I would say, is if you're doing some type of edge analytics, having the right level of horsepower to do that processing at the edge, build some type of inference, and then moving the data off, that gives you, I think, a better picture of that holistic problem and things that you need to think about when you're looking to solve. And so the solution from V5 is really nice because it covers a lot of those elements. Not only from an edge processing, so the ability to take information and process it, develop some type of inference, but also move that data securely, safely to another location for either storage or for further analysis.
And Lloyd, let's highlight real quick from an operational standpoint, because if you had tried to bring all these three different things together, like surveillance, license plate recognition, gunshot detection, in a traditional sense, you'd have three separate projects, three separate project managers, multiple meetings to get it done. That's just not doable when you've got, like you say, shootings, budget, as we've just talked about, as an issue. So what was the value of having all of this together in one platform, and how did it help resolve the case quicker?
So the value was we did everything for this police department. They made the phone call. We went with them. We talked about a plan. And so we were able to use the portable surveillance unit for live video, license plate readers, because there was only one way in and one way out of this neighborhood, and then use our gunshot detection to assist them in knowing when the individuals were there. What ended up happening after we trained the police department on how to use the technology was that the individuals returned. Were actually captured in the act of doing one of the shootings. Their license plate was captured on the license plate reader, and a high-definition video of the driver was captured. So they were able to, with limited resources, using technology, do the follow-up, go out and get warrants, and get these individuals in custody and recover the firearm, and bring some safety and security back to their community for a very low cost and a very quick resolution to this problem.
Hey, and Roland, real quickly too, because I know there's some product names in here, but I think it's important if we just tell for the audience real quick what Onsite means and what OnSound is from a platform standpoint, so they can understand how all of this comes together in a single platform.
So I think Lloyd would best do those justice.
Yeah, so,
okay.
And we'll talk a little bit about more later here, but what we do is we have a self-powered wireless sensor platform. And so what we're able to do is we're able to put these sensors, whether that's video, whether that's a sound sensor to recognize gunshots, a sensor to recognize license plates, we're able to put them all on our portable platform, and then we're able to take these and install them because they're lightweight, they weigh less than 25 pounds, they're solar powered, so they don't need that power, and we can install them in less than 30 minutes in almost any outdoor environment, so we're able to give you that quick solution. And after we get everything installed, we build the user interface for you. Everything's done up through the cloud, so you have everything you need. You can access on your laptop computer or on any one of your smart devices, so that the officers in the field have that situational awareness and instantaneous information in the palm of their hand.
Yeah, you guys, I mean, and what I liked about this too, we're going to move on to the next one, but what I liked about it is you didn't have to take a year-long project to solve a problem that was happening, daily or weekly to try and get a resolution, because the community doesn't want to wait a year for a problem to be solved, especially when you've got drive-bys and shootings like this. So I thought that was a great case study right there. Let's go to this next one, which is basically, this one kind of gets into a little bit more now of about how things are pulled together. So I'm going to let you kind of take a higher level pass at this, Roland, and just kind of describe what's on here. And then Lloyd, I want to ask you a couple questions. But I think this kind of, what I really like about here is this shows all of the different things that can be done.
Sure enough. So I think from a high level perspective, it touches, I think a lot of these use cases touch on the same key characteristics. So portability, edge processing, power or lack of power, and connectivity. Lloyd just hit on it there, where I think it's important for the audience to think about how you would solve these problems otherwise with existing technology or technology that you have today that's not portable, that you need 100% access to power, that where you might need wired connectivity. And so from my perspective, they really do flow in the same way. So getting an understanding as to what information you need to be able to process at the edge, how are you going to securely get that information back to the right location? So I know the V5 system works with a wide variety of VMS or video management systems, as well as what are you going to do about power? I think those are the key questions associated with these case studies. But when you look at,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say what we look at, and if you look at the different smart city initiatives that we look at overall, where what we aim to do is, from an industry standpoint, provide multiple regions and or cities with a similar theme. So multi-jurisdictional is really important to us, and I think we'll talk about that in a little bit. But understanding that there is also a phase gate, and I think that's where V5 and Aero align really well. And Lloyd touched on it a little bit, making sure that there is clear definition associated with what is looking to be solved over a period of time.
Yeah. Well, so let me and Lloyd, real quick for you. I mean, back in the day, look, there were very few things public safety, even police, had to worry about because technology was limited. The problems were limited to a variety of things. But now we've got everything. We've got the connectivity with streetlights. We've got license plate readers, video surveillance, facial recognition, which we've had a couple questions on already, drones. I mean, so the face of this is changing, right? I mean, is there anything that shouldn't be considered under the, you shouldn't think about integrating as you think about solving these problems?
No, I mean, everything's on the table when you look at technology. What's going to make your city safer? What's going to make your city more efficient? How are you going to do these things like we talked about before with lower staffing levels and limited budgets? So nothing's really off the table. Each city's different, though, in what smart technology they need to deploy or employ across their city. So that's what's so great about when you have the different options and you have the people that their job is to create these solutions and to help work you through them, because it just makes everybody's job a little bit easier.
Hey, Roland, this next one's for you, because I remember in our pre-calls and stuff, you were really excited, and you talked about what Colorado's doing, the Colorado Smart Cities Alliance and the Smart Cities Highlight. And it looks like it's kind of comparing some of these smart city initiatives to health sensors that monitor the human body. You're in a hospital, we're monitoring everything, breathing, heart rate, pulse ox, right? Which is an interesting illustration. I mean, I like thinking of a city as a living human body as well. So can you speak a little bit more to this slide and some of the insight that you gained from it?
Absolutely. So I think when we look at cities, it really is this ecosystem that I mentioned a few times. And when you look at the human body, in some cases, you have limited visibility to systemic problems where there is a problem, but you don't necessarily have visibility to it. And that's a significant challenge. Because I think the implication there is if you don't have visibility, you'll spend precious time and resources trying to solve a specific problem, whether it be traffic or illegal dumping or some of the things that we've talked about today. We look at cities in their own unique and inclusive view. So I mentioned, I think, the word holistic once before, but it is looking at a city as an inclusive organism, where you've got traffic patterns, for example, that can be influenced, as I mentioned, not just by cars, but by people and bikes within an intersection. So for the folks that are on the call, it's really looking at your city or municipality with that wide-ranging lens. So you're the experts in your own city, and you understand the different variables that are associated with a specific problem. And so from a technology standpoint, it's really there to give you answers to help solve those problems. And so the benefit is really solving problems fast by understanding more of the data factors so that you can build some type of inference for a solution.
All right, so Lloyd, I'm going to kick off with this one here because we've got a slide now that shows all of these different turnkey solutions, these security solutions. So we've got gunshot detection, portable cameras, license plate readers, pan-tilt zoom cameras, so we can watch everything. We've got solar power, we've got everything. So kind of walk us through some of this. a lot of times we integrate things out of, we cobble things together and it looks like Frankenstein in a sense. So how does this help when you kind of have something that's modular like this? How does this help overcome this learning curve that you need to have? And maybe even though some cities might try and eke it out, with older technology, if you're doing things modular as a service, doesn't that give you the ability then to stay current with the technology and with the capabilities?
Oh, absolutely. So when you're doing the as a service, you know that as updates come available, as the technology changes, you're going to receive those updates, and you're going to have the newest technology to help you solve your problems. Like we talked about before, with the old model of you go out, you buy it, you maintain it. Just as soon as you put it in, and cell phones is a great example of, as soon as you buy a new cell phone, there's another one that does a little bit more that's out there. And so what you could do with the service is, as that new technology comes in, you're getting that, so you don't have to worry about these large expenditures, and then now you have old technology before you even get it deployed. And so, with our platform, what's also good about it, and we talked about it earlier, is as your problems move, you can move this technology with your problem, and it's not just stuck to the video or the gunshot. You can take all these things, put them all together on one platform, and get everything done for you. So you're not, like you're talking about, trying to cobble everything together. You take a gunshot, take a video, take a license plate reader, and then try to figure out how to put all these together, because we've all seen it and tried it, and it generally doesn't work that well. These products are designed to work together and to make it easy.
Yeah, and Lloyd, real quickly on this, because I've got a quick question for Roland on this too, but I see a lot of solar panels on here and batteries. So when we talk about working in areas where there's no power, we're going to have to rely on solar power and battery power, right? Can you kind of just highlight a little bit about the effects of that and the ways you should think about that?
Absolutely. So like we talked about, a lot of times where your problems are, you don't have power and you don't have communications. So with the self-powered solution like our solution, you're able to get your video and your communications out to those areas where traditionally you couldn't. On the devices, you just need a few hours of sunlight to hit those solar panels a day, and you're going to be able to continuously run your video, get your situational awareness, and be able to address that problem. And we'll talk about how some of this was deployed in some of the upcoming case studies, but you're able to solve those problems that traditionally you weren't able to now with this new solar, these self-powered solutions.
Right. And Roland, kind of playing off that real quick, because, there's a lot of things that it seems like a lot of the self-power helps enable the autonomy, helps it run autonomously like you talk about. Mm-hmm. But I also want you to hit real quick from a solution standpoint too, right? When we start talking things that are modular, things that are built to work either independently or together very elegantly, tell me about, from a risk standpoint, how does that help you de-risk not only the cost standpoint, but the operation and the liability?
Yeah, sure. I can answer that, and hopefully I don't answer that in too much techno speak. But when you look at the processing that happens at the edge, so that is the computer that sits inside. There's Intel architecture that sits inside of many of the V5 solutions, which allows you to scale up or down. So if you're looking for, again, it's not necessarily future-proof, but there is a clear path to making sure that you've got the right amount of power for your applications at the edge. And so I think what we also look at is what's interesting about the V5 solution is the fact that there is battery power for a level of redundancy. And it's not just there to power the gateway. It's got enough headroom from a power perspective to help power additional sensors. So I think the word I use all the time is modularity when you're looking at these types of solutions. So not only can it be used for the purpose it's built for necessarily, like what we're talking about with Onsite or OnSound, but there's a potential working with Aero and V5 to utilize these systems as really a power hub for other sensing elements.
Hey, Lloyd, last question for you before we move to the case studies. Look, I'm an old farm boy, Kansas State trooper. We used to get tornadoes, but more importantly, we got hailstorms. Tell me, will this thing bounce a couple of hails off of it and survive?
Yeah, absolutely. So our solar panels are not made like traditional solar panels. A traditional solar panel has a metal frame. It's made of glass. It has bus bars that run through it. So something like hail, rocks, large debris is going to crack the solar panel. And if that happens or one of the bus bars is broken, that panel doesn't work. We run our panels are silicone composite, and they're ruggedized for the outdoors. And what's also unique about them is they run in parallel instead of series. So if any part of the solar panel, let's say it is damaged, let's say maybe it's out in an area where it sustains a bullet or a rock is thrown at it, only that small portion of the solar panel stops working and the rest of the panel will work. We tested it and it works excellent.
Yeah, anybody who's put up Christmas lights understands why parallel is important as compared to series. So let's move on to this real quick. We've got time. We're gonna hit 3 case studies real quick, and folks, keep your questions coming in. In about 5-6 minutes, we're gonna start taking questions from you folks. So keep those things coming in. So let's pop on this first case study right here, because normally when you think of illegal dumping, the first thing I think of is Sopranos, Tony Soprano running organized crime rackets, and it's all New Jersey. But illegal dumping is not just an East Coast thing, right? I mean, is it happening as much as people think it is, or it's happening, you know, I quite frankly, I didn't know it's happening that much on the West Coast. So talk a little bit about this illegal dumping and the way you approached it.
And so we're seeing illegal dumping, and those are, when we meet with customers, that's one of the biggest concerns we're seeing these days. It's happening from big cities to small cities, so it is definitely a concern and a very expensive concern for a lot of cities. So we have a city here in the Silicon Valley that receives hundreds to thousands of calls every month about illegal dumping. It's costing them approximately $1 million annually to run a task force to try to clean this up, to try to answer all these citizen complaints. So the traditional ways of, you know, spot checks or waiting for a citizen complaint to come in and then send somebody out to the area, they just weren't working. So this city knew about the V5 portable solution through one of their partners they work with, and were able to address this dumping issue through technology. So what they did was they used video, high definition, and they use license plate readers. And what they'll do is they know their hotspots where they're having problems. They'll place the high definition video, they'll place the license plate reader, which allows them to actually capture individuals in the act of dumping. And so after they're caught, what happens is they do their investigative follow-up, and then they send that individual, because they have a picture of them and they have their license plate, a citation for the dumping violation. So what that helps for is word gets out that, hey, you know, don't go dump your garbage in this area. What it also does is it helps them recover money to help with the cleanup of this issue. So it does a couple different things. And then when word gets out of, hey, you need to be careful because this city's using this technology, it actually slows down the dumping. In the areas where the technology was placed, they haven't had any dumping problems within the last year at those hotspots.
Wow. And like we said, you know, and the nice thing about this too is that when you deliberately apply it to solve a problem like that, then the fines, the money that you recover, more than pay right for the cost of the solution to deploy it. I mean, there's like a multiple factor that says, hey, look, you can spend $1 million, or you can spend far less than that, recover the money back in fines and pay for the solution. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement, yes. And what was also nice about it is it didn't have to touch any of their existing infrastructure, go to their servers, because everything was done, you know, and set up for them. So again, with the mobile app and with everything they have, all their personnel out in the field have this information and have the technology right at their fingertips.
Let's talk to this next one, because like I said, we've got about 2 to 3 minutes before we start getting into questions here. So expanded, this is one where we talk about expanded outdoor safety, you know, quickly. It was a Bay Area university. They wanted to expand outdoor security. And with universities, obviously they're a target. We've seen mass shootings. We've seen other incidents happen there, and they don't want to disrupt student life, right? So talk real quickly about how the university here went about approaching this and what some of the reasons they did that.
So they had a very robust interior camera system, but they didn't have video on the exterior. So they were looking at how, after a couple of incidents, could they secure their campus using technology, but not disrupt student life, not disrupt faculty life with the traditional systems, and to get that information that they needed so that they could help their police department. And so what they did was they went with the V5 solution for portable surveillance unit for video, not only around the campus, but on satellite facilities, because we all know that a lot of universities, you'll have your main campus and then you'll have other satellite positions, which are often difficult for smaller departments or universities to have personnel monitoring those areas. They also wanted to, with the unfortunate increase in school shootings and some of those issues related to gun violence, to have a solution on campus that worked together. So it was, as Roland talked about, that ecosystem where you have your gunshot, you have your video to help your police department and to make your campus safer. So what they were able to do was place multiple units around their perimeter along with the gunshot. They didn't have to trench, which was a big cost savings. Trenching in the Bay Area here is anywhere from $150 to $300 a linear foot. So putting up a number of cameras or portable surveillance units, they put out about 30. You could see how much that would add up in cost for trenching. And what it did for them, not only did it give the police... I'm sorry?
No, continue on.
So not only did it give the police department situational awareness, it also made people on campus feel a little bit safer knowing that this university was being proactive to address these issues instead of being reactive and waiting for something to happen.
Yeah, and I think in the medical profession, they say that's sometimes when the cure is worse than the actual problem. So when you talk about the cost of trenching, by the time you do that, you spent far more money than, looking at an as-a-service solution is, hey, look, we've got time for one quick one, and we've got to hop into some questions. So let's just talk about this one. This one is actually Hayward, right? So their service calls dropped 61% in the first 3 months because they had a rapid transit station, actually proximity to high street crime. We know that they didn't have easy access to it because it was a separate facility. So walk us through the Hayward solution real quick, and then we're going to hop into some questions here.
So Hayward had built a new city hall in an area near this transit center, and when they built it, they hadn't thought about the video surveillance around the area, so they hadn't trenched or run power and connectivity. Unfortunately, they started getting a high level of crime around that area and wanted a solution where they didn't need to trench or affect their infrastructure on this brand new facility and area. So they went with us at V5, and we were able to put video up around the area. When people realized that they were on video after a few arrests were made, the calls for service that the police were receiving dropped about 61% in the first 90 days. And so what was great about this one was their IT department was very busy. So when we built it for them, we did everything, and it didn't have to attach to their IT infrastructure, and actually saved their IT staff a lot of extra work. So I know they were very happy about that.
Right. Well, hey guys, we're right at the end here real quick. So I'm going to just pop this up real quick. We've looked at some of the key benefits, which were the autonomous systems, really eliminate the need for the IT department to integrate solutions. Hey, Roland, would you just give a couple bullet points about this for us real quick, and then I'll preface into the because I really think I like the way you were talking about, from a solution standpoint, integrating this all together to make it, it's got to be easy or nobody's going to do it, right?
Right. Yeah. And so from, my perspective, and I think when we look at it from a solution side, it has to be flexible for the organizations depending on what the use case is. And so the ability to go out and deliver these solutions with a level of flexibility, I think is a bit of a challenge until you've done a couple of them. But I think that is really what we look at from the V5 technology standpoint is even ourselves, I hadn't mentioned this before, but we have 3 systems deployed on our campus. It took us 2 hours to do it. We had to rent a cherry picker, but we got it done. And we've had an app running for about 2 years. And so for us, the ability to showcase that technology in an easy, flexible way to get it deployed is absolutely key.
Well, let's get into the fun part, because there's some good questions that have come in, and don't go anywhere yet, Roland, because I'm throwing you the first tough one, and it comes from Robert Howard at the New York City Cyber Command. Look, there's no free lunch on these webinars, right? So, and Robert actually brings up a really great question, because recently the Customs and Border Patrol had a breach, facial recognition, about 100,000 images, license plates at one particular place on one particular border. So his question was, how do you integrate, secure, and ensure the data integrity that the end users are protected from these events? But also, it's a really great question as when you move to new technology, how do you connect it? But I think the key thing here too is from a privacy standpoint, how do you address these issues, especially since facial recognition is such a hot topic right now between the East Coast and West Coast, in terms of.
So I'll answer it this way. So first, I just want to say that I'm in no way associated with the organization that is noted as part of the CBP breach. But when we took a look at the article here, because security is a big concern, we're a Fortune 109 company on the Fortune 500 list, and we're looking at security concerns on an ongoing basis. So when we were reading the article, what we saw were that the license plate images and the traveler images were collected by the CBP, and this third-party organization was looking to match those together. So it goes back to what I had said earlier around edge processing. We had a use case actually in the retail space where we were looking to tie in image data. And what we were doing with that image data was just collecting sex, age range, emotion, and 2 other data points. But what we're looking to do is tie that back into point of sale. So in a very similar case, but albeit very different, we were trying to put together 2 different data sets. So we did all of that on site. All the image processing was done locally. The metadata, so that is the age, sex, mood, what did they buy, was then aggregated together and transmitted off-site. And then the images were deleted. So I think there's a technical, that's how we looked at it from a technical standpoint. But the other way to look at it is certainly from a policy standpoint, making sure that that you're doing everything on site, you're doing everything locally, and you limit the breach. But there's another question in here, which I think is really interesting, because I think that the thing that jumps to me is then, well, okay, let's say you do everything on site, everything that you're doing from a metadata capture has happened locally. I saw there was a question on here about local security. So how is the local device secured? Which maybe we want to jump to.
Okay, yeah, let's hold that for a second, because there was a good question in here too, and Lloyd, I want to throw this one at you. Anna Espinoza from the Navy region. So we've talked about drive-bys and things after, but one of the concerns is active shooters, things that are going on right now. So can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the ways you would approach that, some of the techniques that you would deploy this stuff, especially for areas where you might be concerned, like there could be a potential active shooter, or that an area that you're concerned about will eventually have one?
Yeah, and that's a good question, because it's how do you set up these sensors to help you in that arena? And so when you have a complete platform, that's where you're able to get an edge on that. So you're not just putting out a gunshot to capture sounds, or you're not just putting out a video. You're taking all those things in those areas that we're talking about, and you're putting them on one platform. So you're placing your gunshot detection units so that you can get immediate alerts. So when there is a shooting, we all know in active shooters, time is of the essence. So as the units in the field are getting these notifications, they can quickly start responding before the first calls even come in. You have your video set up so that as the information from the gunshots coming in, you know which video unit it's closest to, so you can see the video. If the suspect came in a vehicle or left in a vehicle, you have your license plate readers positioned in these areas where you have choke points, so you know everybody coming and going. So it helps you not only to get to the scene quicker, but we know a lot of active shooters, by the time police arrive on a lot of active shooters, they're already gone, especially in some of the workplace violence incidents. So it doesn't just give you that quick response, it also helps you with that follow-up to catch the individual or individuals that are responsible. So just to wrap everything up, it's not just one technology, it's using all these technologies on one platform to come up with a complete solution.
And you just keyed in on something too, because when you're responding to something, you want to make sure you've got accurate information. In other words, you got to be able to trust the location of the information, that it's actually happening there, and that you're not being directed to. Even a block away is a matter of life and death when seconds count, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, but it's critical to have accurate and timely information.
Hey, Roland, let's go back, because you were talking about, protection from a local standpoint, of the data and stuff. So why don't you follow that thread out real quick, and then we'll have a couple closing thoughts, and then we're going to close out the webinar. Go ahead.
You got it. Yeah, maybe Lloyd had some additional thoughts on that one as well. But so it is when you look at the hardware in of itself, there are options for securing the hardware. So securing the USB. So even if it somehow does get stolen, there's ways that you can secure the data. Microsoft's got a wide variety of different solutions that help with that from a software standpoint. But what's important is that it's the embedded side that can help with that. But there's a wide variety of things you can do from a physical security standpoint with the information that's inside of the computer. And so maybe just going back to the CBP question, where I talked a lot about the edge, but there's also things that you can do, one from a policy standpoint, as I mentioned, but also making sure that your servers are secure. That's what we look at, and I think that's a whole other webinar.
Yeah, and look, folks, and there's obviously, we've got some questions in here. We're not going to be able to get to all of them, but what I'd like to do is, Roland, give me just 30 seconds, your final thoughts about this, and then I want to end with you, Lloyd, and then we're going to close out the webinar. So, Roland, you go first.
Yeah, sure thing. So I think to sum up in what we've talked about, that there's a wide range of technology change that's coming. Connectivity, edge server computing associated with AI and ML. There's a wide variety of things that happen. There's aging infrastructure that requires maintenance. We're doing our best to understand the challenges from an industry standpoint when it comes down to state and local government. So we are always looking at those challenges. We have an understanding as the implications, but we want to continue to work with our partners at V5 and our extended ecosystem network to help solve problems for this type of audience.
And Captain Kinsworthy, you get the last word.
So I think the technology is out there, and a lot of public entities, especially law enforcement, know the technology they want. So it's just looking at the changing ways that you can get that technology. A lot of the fiscal procedures that are set in place have been the procedures that have been set in place for a long time, and they have to be because it's public money. But to look at, hey, how can you use this public safety as a service to your advantage so that you can get those tools you need?
Guys, that's a great way to sum it up. So, look, I want to be respectful of our time. We could keep going for another hour because I've got tons of questions, but we have to wrap here. So, in closing, I want to thank Lloyd Kinsworthy, Roland Ducote, and I want to especially thank our partner, Arrow Electronics. We can't put on these webinars without great industry partners, and great industry partners also bring other great industry partners like Lloyd and Arrow and V5. So we want to make sure that we recognize the service that everybody's providing here. We thank you folks for what you're doing out there. We look forward to having you on another webinar. If you have any questions, remember, 48 hours, you'll get a link to this. Share this with your friends. Everybody stay safe out there, and all of you guys have a great afternoon.